Hello and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in business and in life and simplify them. And friends, okay, it's the holiday season. It is the days of cheese balls and so many things to drink and eat and shove into your mouth at any point in time on your festive holiday break. And let's face it, sometimes, nay, most times, your tummy, your gut is not very happy with you during the holidays. Can we just get real for a second? And so I thought, what a perfect topic to simplify today is to actually talk about how to improve your gut health. My special guest today is Dr. Daniel, DC, FCN, FDN, CFMP, and he hopefully will explain what all of those acronyms mean. Bottom line, he's a doctor of natural medicine. He's a clinical diagnostic nutritionist and a functional medicine practitioner with a passion to help people achieve health without a prescription. He operates one of the largest virtual functional medicine practices in the United States, and I cannot wait to dive deep into this topic with him. I'd like to welcome to the Simplifiers podcast, Dr. Daniel. Hey, Dr. Daniel.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. And let's face it, we are not here to name and shame and throw people into a guilt spiral for overeating and overindulging in the holidays. Let's say that right out from the gate, yes? But I think it's also so incredibly important as you're listening to this episode, you're probably driving to grandma's house right now, you're thinking about all the gravy that is about to cover your entire plate of food and leftovers, that we share any great tips and information that you might have to help people make better choices during the holidays. That sound good?
Yeah, that's awesome.
So why don't we start at the basics? I mentioned a term, functional medicine. Define that for us. What is functional medicine and why is improving our gut health so darn important, especially now?
So functional medicine is really it's a systems-based approach to addressing chronic health problems. Certainly today, it's more of a popular term that's being thrown around, but the reality is that it's been around for a long time. It's integrative healthcare or natural medicine. And I think it's also important to appreciate the fact that conventional medicine is amazing at what it does, right? It obviously saves lives. If you've got raging infections, if you've got an emergency, they're there to save you. And that is amazing. Functional medicine is really the extension, not to replace, but an extension of that care, but to really resolve chronic health issues where conventional medicine hasn't done such a good job. And of course, our goal as functional medicine doctors and integrated doctors is to do these things in the most natural way, but using advanced medical diagnostics and then combining that with the safety and efficacy of natural treatments.
Mm-hmm. So is it fair to say that conventional medicine is really best for I've broken a bone and I need to get that, sling and fixed and wrapped. Functional medicine is functioning on the everyday life of things. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. And that's, it's such an important thing to understand. So many times they ask me, say, should I still have my medical doctor? It's like, absolutely. Yeah. In case something happens, in case you have an emergency or something that's critical, they're going to shine when it comes to that. But it's all the other things. It's, the development of heart disease and diabetes and autoimmune conditions, depression, all these other things where, of course, we all know that they kind of slap pills and give you prescriptions for that, and that doesn't really resolve the issues. So what we're trying to do is actually get to the cause of that, the root cause, and then, of course, correct it.
Okay, so I think it is the buzzword of the year of talking about your gut health. Tell us more about what that means then.
Gut health is fascinating. It's so for me, I started off my career, as a chiropractor, and certainly in school we learn a whole lot about the connections between back pain, neck pain, musculoskeletal health, and the gut. There's a very strong relationship there. So I had some understanding of that. Moving forward and starting to take care of patients, you begin to realize that there is so much more to gut health and its impact on our overall health. And this is why a lot of experts consider the gut to be the second brain. That's what they refer to it as, because there's so many connections between the gut and the rest of our body and how everything works. There's a gut-brain axis, meaning your digestive system literally creates compounds, molecules that can change how you feel, right? So like serotonin and dopamine, these brain chemicals that we usually think of are only occurring in our brain, turns out that your gut's producing a big part of them. So healthy gut, healthy brain.
Yeah.
Yeah, gut hormone axis, gut liver axis. I mean, you name it. There are so many connections between the gut and the rest of our body and how everything is working.
And so I imagine there's going to be quite a few moments in our conversation today where people's brains are going to explode. They're going to be like, what?
Yeah.
Because I remember when I was looking at your website and reading some of your articles, a couple of things that stuck out. I was like, what? First and foremost, you say that the average human being consumes 30 to 50 tons of food through their lifetime. That is a lot of food your digestive system has to process over a lifetime. And then the second one that blew my mind was just what you said there, that over 90%, 90, of serotonin is actually produced within the gut. Okay, tell us more here.
Yeah, so it's called corticotropin releasing hormones. So within the digestive tract, and it makes sense when you think about the whole goal of our digestive system is, of course, everybody knows that food is one of the most important things for being healthy. You eat that food, your digestive system has the task of extracting nutrients from that food, which then you use to be able to do your daily activities.
Right.
So a lot of the precursors to how your body's going to function, a lot of the molecules that your body needs in order for things to work well are going to begin in the gut. It's literally the synthesis. It's the factory, right, where everything else is then going to be impacted. And so, of course, it makes sense that the food that you're eating is going to eventually turn into these tiny little molecules that your cells use to be able to function.
Yep.
And when we talk about neurotransmitters, like I just said, they're called corticotropin releasing hormones. And there's so many different hormones that can be produced within the gut that ultimately have different types of functions within the body. In this case, serotonin, yeah, you bet. And it's not just serotonin. There's dopamine. There's things called epinephrine or norepinephrine that could be impacted from your digestive system. And certainly everybody knows that when we're depressed, when we're not feeling well, when we're not happy, what do we tend to do? We go and we eat. And so a lot of your emotional eating cues are literally just these signals from your gut saying, hey, I need something, feed me.
Yeah.
And then therefore you then produce these healthy molecules. However, if you're not eating the right foods, then it's false, right? And so you could be misleading your digestive system. And then that just creates that cycle of, oh, I need more food because I'm not getting the nourishment that I need.
Yeah, and I can imagine what my tummy likes to say is it says, Mary, ice cream. I need ice cream right now. And not just ice cream, I need chocolate and I need red wine to wash it all down. And what that does is that gives me the big boost of sugar in my system, but then what comes later is the crash and later the hangover as well, right? And it's that cyclical cycle of needing, giving it the wrong thing, needing some more, right?
It's very deceiving, and that's where, you get these short-term rewards. And so, of course, we are very emotional. We feel, right? We say, oh, this makes me feel good, but it's false. It's very deceptive. And in the long run, you're not going to be getting the basic machinery that you need from your food in order to produce those healthy compounds. And so, it creates this vicious cycle where you stay sad or you stay upset and you want to continue feeding it.
And it never feels like enough. I think if you eat the wrong things or you consume the wrong things as well. So what I thought was really interesting is the gut health axis. And by the way, we'll put a link in the show notes for this episode so you guys can see all of Dr. Daniel's amazing graphs and things and find out more information. But tell us more, like what other parts of the body or even the mind does our tummies, our guts affect?
Yeah, so like I just said, there's the big one would be the gut to brain axis because, of course, the brain controls everything, right? It's our central processing unit. And that's a big one just by itself, the fact that your gut has direct connections to your brain and can influence it. And because of that, everything else downstream is going to be impacted indirectly. Now, there's an extension to that. If we talk about the relationship between our digestive system and the rest of our body, there's a gut hormone axis. So your gut can produce hormones. Estrogen would be a big one for females. It has an impact in testosterone, even for men. And so you can talk about your primary sex hormones and then also your stress hormones. So there's a strong relationship between our ability to respond to stressful events. So that's the gut hormone axis. There's also a gut liver axis. Again, direct connections between your gut and your liver. And this is important because part of digestion, of course, we always think about things coming in, but how you eliminate it is also very important. And are you able to transform things that you put into your body that are maybe not so healthy and transform them into a way that is healthy, that you can safely eliminate them? So that elimination and detoxification part is super important. And that's where the gut to liver axis comes into play. You also have the gut cardiovascular axis. You have the gut immune axis. 80% of our immunity, of our immune cells, resides within the digestive tract. And so for any immune dysfunctions, autoimmunity is rampant right now. It's just growing astronomically, and you can find all sorts of autoimmune conditions that ultimately relate back to the gut.
Well, gosh, and it blew my mind when I think about it. Like, I mean, your gut is linked to your skin. If you have acne or rosacea, or if you have gingivitis in your oral care, your thyroid, we hear about how the gut is related to our brain and potentially to anxiety, depression, all of that. But there's just all these other things. So it really, truly is the center of our bodies and, is going out and playing out to everything else. So
right.
You were so perfect and eloquent in saying just a second ago, well, it might be also your elimination. I'm always thinking in the back of my head, we're going to talk about poop today, okay? Let's just put that out for the record. If anybody's listening, we're going to talk about your poop. So what are some warning signs that our gut health is maybe not doing so great right now?
Well, I think to really appreciate that, warning signs, because there's, the obvious ones and then there's the not so obvious.
Yep.
We can look at the pillars of the 4 pillars of gut health, which number 1 would be digestion and absorption. So you've got to eat the right food and you've got to properly digest and absorb it. That brings up an important point that just because you're eating healthy doesn't mean that you're fully digesting and absorbing, right? So that's just step 1. Step number 2 would be detoxification and elimination, which is just that, your poop, which is super important. Also, of course, your kidney function and peeing out toxins. That's very important. Those are the 2 basic pillars. And then you have microbial balance, which is the collection of healthy bacteria, right, that's in our gut. These bacteria help you to build a strong immune system. They help you to digest food better. They literally create vitamins for you to be able to utilize. So that's a super important aspect. And then the final one would be barrier integrity. So between those 4 things, you can then determine more or less what could be happening to somebody based on their symptoms. Now, this is what brings up the obvious stuff, which, if you're not going to the bathroom if you're not having regular bowel movements, that's an issue. If you're, so diarrhea, constipation, those are the big ones.
Yeah.
Reflux, which are signs of maldigestion, those are really big, obvious symptoms. The not so obvious ones would be those symptoms that fall under the other 2 pillars of detoxification and elimination, and microbial balance and barrier integrity, because you don't really know that. You don't know if you're deficient in, I diagnose thiamine deficiencies almost every week. It's like everybody's got vitamin B1 deficiencies. Such a basic little thing, but it could cause all sorts of problems, and you wouldn't really know that unless you were measuring it, right? So that's where it gets a little bit hard to just base it off of symptoms alone. With microbial balance, you could have infections. And these are, most people don't realize this, but these are low-grade chronic infections that you're not feverishly ill. You don't have diarrhea or stomach problems, but they're there, and they're causing abnormal physiology. And again, the only way to know it is if you go 20 years, develop something really serious, then you figure it out. Or if you're testing, ahead of time. And then barrier integrity, that's another difficult one. You had mentioned there's a gut to skin axis. A lot of times the manifestation of things on our skin is a sign of barrier integrity. And this is another thing that most people don't really think about, but when you eat food, the food's inside your body, right?
Yep.
But it's actually outside of your body. So if you think of your digestive tract as just this one long tube from my mouth, it's just a tube from my mouth all the way down to my anus where I'm going to poop out. That is actually outside of my body's cavity. And it's supposed to be that way because your digestive tract is protecting anything foreign from actually getting into your body cavity. And so that's one of the functions of the digestive system, is to decide what gets into my cells and what gets ultimately eliminated. So barrier function, or leaky gut, that's what most people think about it. That's where you have breaks in that. And now you don't have a protective mechanism. So basically food can pass through and it's like, oh my gosh, your body says, what's going on? Immune system, let's go and attack.
Yep.
There's your autoimmunity, right? So that's one example of how things like that can develop.
So that's interesting. So is this also related to if you have bacteria growing in your gut or things like that you hear about?
Absolutely. So when we talk about infections, 33% of the population at any point in time has an infection, and yet they don't know about it. Also, most of those infections, they happen from our environment, not from traveling to some other third world country or, going on vacation. And so most of these infections are in our backyard, basically.
Wow.
And when we talk about infections, these could be bacterial, pathogenic bacteria that shouldn't be in your digestive system. So remember, there's good bacteria and there's bad bacteria. There's also fungal infections. And again, there's good, healthy fungus, and then there's abnormal or pathogenic. And then you have parasites. Parasites would be things like tapeworms, helminths, protozoans, amoebas. You have a whole number of parasites that could be affecting our body.
Right.
This also brings up an important point, because earlier we talked about cravings, right? Like when you want to have ice cream or wine. We now know that certain parasites, the food that we're eating, they feed off of. And so because of the gut to brain connection, these parasites have a way of almost hijacking our brain and sending the signal saying, hey, I want that food, so that way you can feed my existence, right? And so it's pretty interesting how parasites can hijack our bodies and actually impact our thoughts in a way to drive abnormal behavior.
I'm totally imagining Sigourney Weaver from Alien right now. I mean, as you talk about that, but I think it's true, right? Because there are times where I know, for me, I am not perfect by any stretch of the means, where if I am being unconscious in the food and beverage that I'm drinking, I'm pushing the big red F it button. It does feel like something else is controlling my mind and making me make poor choices. Now, I feel like, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, it's okay to indulge here and there in balance, right? We're not sitting down and eating a whole tub of ice cream, but we're maybe saying, okay, instead of ice cream, a really nice dark chocolate, might just satiate me at this stage. Is that okay?
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is, a lot of times when I have an initial consult with a patient, you have to realize people come to me, and by the time they come to me, they've been everywhere, right? They've been to the experts, they've been to the Mayo Clinic, I mean, all sorts of places. And a lot of times they're on these super restricted diets. We have a horrible relationship with food to begin with, and then you get, told to be on this super restricted diet, and they've been like that for years. That is no way to live by any means, right? So health is not incessantly worrying about being healthy, and so we have to remember that, right? That we can't just stress ourselves out to be so restricted in our diet that we have no joy and pleasure in life, because that's not what it's about. And we also have to remember that we are human beings. We have earned our right to be here, and I guarantee you, ice cream and some wine is not going to kill you. It shouldn't.
Right.
If it does, that's just a sign or symptom of something dysfunctional that can be fixed, and you can get back to balance and enjoy your life. And so that's important to understand. Now, I'm a diet agnostic. Like, I don't have a particular diet that I recommend. Right. Certainly for gut problems, I do have places where I start, but that is never going to be the end. The final destination for every patient is to identify what is the most diverse diet that somebody could be on that's not causing problems, right? And so those are the things that need to be figured out.
Well, and I imagine also everybody's bodies are completely different. So Atkins can work for some people and, other things can work for others, right? You have to sort of figure it out through trial and error.
there was a research study that was published, I think, it was published last week. This was out of, it was an Israeli research group and working with the Human Microbiome Project, where they're trying to map out the microbiome.
Yeah.
They demonstrated how we are also unique and different. Like we each have fingerprints, right? And those are unique to us. And it's funny because I have even been taught this, or I've studied this, where what is the ideal microbiome? As if all of us are going to have the same microbiome, right? And so that's what they're trying to do, is like, what is normal?
Yeah.
That's like saying, you're unique and different, and you're different from me. So if you're not like me, am I going to say you're not normal? That doesn't make sense. So we're all different, and our microbiomes are also different. And those microbiomes, these bugs, these healthy bacteria, feed off certain foods. And so that is exactly why one diet might work for me, but it doesn't work for you, because you're different. You have to feed your bugs to keep them healthy, to keep you healthy. That's pretty much how it comes down.
It makes a lot of sense. Okay, so if people are feeling bloated, if they have trapped wind, if their poops are super irregular or just not happening at all for days on end, these might be some warning signs that things are a little bit off right now, right?
Right.
And what's there's like a poop scale, right? Where you can
rate
your poops by different shapes and sizes and colors. Tell us more.
So when we talk about poop, this is, a lot of times humans are horrible at recall, by the way. So for my patients, I have them do food, mood, and poop journaling.
Oh my gosh.
So literally writing down the foods that they eat. And again, we're like, if I were to ask you what you ate last week, you'll have an idea, but there's a lot of things that we would miss. So I asked them to track it, literally write it down, journal. And then also next to that, we also indicate the quality of our poop. So journal how your bowel movements are. And there's something called a Bristol stool chart, which is a really good graphical presentation of quality of poop. It goes from 1 to 7. And what I have my patients do is just write the number. They look at the chart, they write the number down. Like every time they have a bowel movement, it was, a 3 today, or it was a 6. And also your mood, because that, of course, is super important when we're talking about gut health and nutrition and just how you're feeling overall. And what happens, and this is always the case, even my patients who are on point, who like already track their nutrition, or at least they think they're tracking it appropriately, it's insightful because you're able to see patterns emerge of maybe certain types of foods, when they eat, things like that, and how it ultimately impacts their digestion. So I think taking inventory is always something that we should start with. I'm really big with self-health tracking. And so there's a lot of things that we can do on our own to be our own best doctors.
And so what you're not saying here, Dr. D, is that we're not taking poop selfies, and I'm not submitting photos to you of my poop. But like simply we have a chart that you can look at and go, oh, well, this is like a number 3 or something like that. Okay, just being clear there.
I'd be lying, though, if I said patients didn't send me pictures of their poop. So, yeah.
I'm sure you become an expert. So if you're kind of curious about this and it makes you chuckle as much as me, go to our show notes, thesimplifierspodcast.com, and look up this episode, and you'll find a link to that Bristol stool chart. And you, my friend, can also track your poop just as much as I do. But also, I think it's so important because is it true that your poops that are having today are from foods you ate 24 to 48 hours ago, right?
Yeah, so it depends, right? The foods have different transit times. And so, depending if we're talking about muscle meat, like a steak, versus watermelon, like watermelon has a transit time of approximately 20 minutes, meaning that you can eat it and boom, it's going to come out. And this brings up an important point, which I'm not, again, 100% on board with this, but I think there is something to some meal timing or combination of foods. In other words, if you ate a piece of steak, which has a very slow transit time, 24 hours, 48 hours, and you ate watermelon, along with that, the watermelon is going to want to come out fast. So that could actually speed up elimination, and maybe it's going to make you have some digestive difficulties, but it was just because those are 2 different transit times. And 30,000 years ago, we didn't have access to watermelon and steak, likely at the same time, right? And so our digestive systems just weren't designed for that kind of, so that's where paying attention to the types of foods that you're eating and combining can have an impact.
Well, it's interesting you should say that because I think about, a caveman probably didn't have access to, bison and watermelon in the same meal, right? So they're primarily eating protein rich, and that's how their digestive system has gotten used to eliminating, absorbing, all that stuff. Makes a lot of sense. Okay, so yes, so you now know the warning signs. You're thinking about your bodies, and really the charting and keeping track of things. Again, I want to stress, like, that's not out of guilt and shame and like pointing fingers of you're doing it wrong. It's simply a place to gather information and do it for a week, do you suggest?
Yeah, whatever is representative of your diet, right?
Hmm.
So, and again, I'm not, not to stress people out because sometimes just tracking is like, oh, that gets me stressful. But we
Right.
do have to get some data points in order to figure out what's happening. And so, for nutrient tracking, whatever is going to be represented, if you eat the same meals over and over,
Yeah.
and maybe within 3 days, that's it, like it's not going to change. Okay, so I think that would be good. You just get a representation of that sample size. If you have a huge diverse diet and it's 2 weeks, then it's going to be a little bit longer. So it really depends. But yeah, most people, I would suggest 7 days, 7 to 10 days would be a good amount of data to be looking at.
Yeah, because you got to know where your starting point is, because your starting
Yep.
point is going to be completely different from mine, and from others as well. Okay, great. So I know that a lot of our listeners are small business owners. They sometimes work in very high stress situations, and opportunities for overeating are abundant in a lot of people's jobs and industries. But let's talk about stress. Like, you have a belief that there are 4 primary triggers of stress. What are they, and how do we overcome them this holiday season? And don't name my mother as the number one.
Yeah, you know what? You just said don't name your mother. This is just before we get into the 4 triggers. ACEs. Have you ever heard of ACEs? So basically, you have adverse childhood events. That's what ACEs are.
Yeah.
And there is a strong connection between adverse childhood events, the things that impacted us when we were children. This could be divorce. This could be financial disparity. This could be being bullied, whatever it is. And there's quizzes that you can find online that have been researched, and it gives you your ACE score. Those are associated with all-cause mortality. So like every single healthcare condition, chronic health condition, recently, 2 weeks ago, they just showed how heart disease, there's this very strong correlation between the number of ACEs you have or your ACE score and things like heart disease.
Wow.
So when we talk about stress, it's important to recognize that it's not just what's impacting you right now. And yes, the holidays coming up, that's certainly something that's going to stress us out, but it's an accumulation of stress, and it's boiling right underneath everything. And so stress definitely is going to be a part of every chronic health condition in some way. And so it's important, again, just to appreciate that. Now, when we talk about the primary triggers of stress, the first one is your perceived stress. So this is why I started with the ACEs, because how you perceive things is important. You could have been involved in a divorce as a child, your parents split, me too, but we did perceive it completely different, right? And so that matters. So emotional and physical stress, that's very important. That's one of the triggers. Glucose regulation. So a lot of times we don't think about that, but how our body is regulating glucose right now, which again ties into foods that you're eating and physical activity, that can initiate an exaggerated stress response in the body. Circadian disruption, so abnormal sleep and light dark cues, those types of things. And then finally, inflammatory signaling. So those would be the 4 primary factors when we're talking about stress, which is very abstract, right? When we say, oh, I'm stressed. What kind of stress are you having? And is it physical? Is it emotional? And then you kind of break it down into those 4 categories.
And I think also, well, I can only speak from my own personal experience. When you're traveling to see family or friends in the holiday season, you're out of your regular routine. So you're not sleeping in your normal bed. You're not eating your normal foods. You're certainly not drinking as much water as you should be or working out like you normally do. So everything's sort of thrown out the window, right? And
Absolutely.
what's left is pumpkin pie and cheese balls. So, like I have about a 3-day threshold sometimes with my parents where I'm like, yep, that's about as much as we all need, right? Like, so stress does become a thing of the holidays. What do you do to eliminate stress from your life?
So like you just said, I really do try to stick to my routines and anywhere I'm at. I mean, I've got a morning routine that I stick to. I've got a downing routine, or the things that I do in the evenings, regardless of, and I've been working on this for years now, but I feel like I've gotten to a point where I'm pretty disciplined about that, regardless of where I'm at, whether I'm at a convention in another state or, if I'm at my mom's house and maybe I don't have everything. I have these basic routines that keep me in my, it's entrained almost into my cycle.
Yeah.
And I feel that that's what helps me is just those, and they're simple things. So like I journal in the mornings. I do certain physical activities like a mobility type program for myself, and I do this every night. These are almost like Pavlovian cues for myself to like, okay, my day's fine. Like everything else could be disrupted, but I'm doing these things. It keeps me into a particular pattern, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I do.
Yeah, and I imagine that people that are listening right now can think of a few, not we're talking 27, but just 3 or 4 things that you know and trust really help you set your day up for success in the morning if you were to do those, and to set yourself up for success for a good quality sleep tonight. And in the downing routine, like you say, I love that idea. So as you're listening right now, go ahead and hit pause and just jot down a couple of ideas. Like, okay, when I head to mom's house tonight, I'm going to do this. First stop, go to Whole Foods and get some healthy snacks and stash good things in the fridge rather than just junk. Or, okay, tomorrow morning, I'm going to go take a walk by myself for 30 minutes in the nice cold weather, right? Whatever it takes, jot down a couple ideas, come back to us immediately after. Okay, so we've talked about stress, and reality is if you're super stressed, then what does that mean to your digestive system?
So when we're stressed out, and again, whether that's physical or emotional stress, the ultimate goal of stress is to let your body know that something's not right. And the environment, the way that we interact with the environment, it will increase stress hormones like cortisol, which is one of the most common, hormones, right? That we've all heard about. Cortisol does a number of things in terms of digestion. It slows down. It pretty much stops or halts digestion. So if you have food in your system, you're not going to fully digest and absorb that food. And so there's going to be a lot of nutrient depletion that can occur just from something like stress. The other thing is that you do create, these stress compounds it does impact us physically in the sense that it constricts our blood vessels. So it's going to slow down blood flow to the rest of the body. We start to breathe abnormally, which can also impact overall health, right? So it's just this cascade of events that occur all because of these abnormal spikes in cortisol. Now, that was designed for us to react to a saber-toothed tiger, right, 30,000 years ago, and to run away. You weren't going to be digesting your food at that time. Today, we've switched saber-toothed tigers for paying our bills and, stress of the holidays and politics and all these other things. And so it's like we're constantly being bombarded with it. And that's why I don't know how you can be healthy without having some kind of stress reduction program or protocol installed in your life.
Well, it makes a lot of sense when you put it that way, because Aunt Brenda could be your saber-toothed tiger this week, right? During the holidays. And, Aunt Brenda's going to say something that pushes that exact button. And let's face it, when you're under stress, you're probably not having a bowel movement. You're probably not digesting food, and that's throwing your whole rhythm internally off, which, like you said at the beginning of the episode, is now the access to throwing off everything else in your whole body, your brain, your heart, your oral health, all the things. Okay, so what's the first step? What can we do today to start making a positive change and actually improve our gut health? Little bits at a time. What would you recommend?
Yeah, so I think step one is to slow down, literally, right? So just to kind of stop and take a breath. A lot of times, and I say this because when people come to me, maybe they're kind of ready to go. They're amped up. They're concerned about their health issues, and that in itself is going to create problems. So we have to slow down and calm everything down. This is why mindfulness is such an important part of health, right? Is just kind of paying attention to our surroundings. And when I say slow down, it's not just emotionally or behaviorally, but like when we're eating. Slow down, chew your food thoroughly, eat really slow, because that can impact, obviously, your digestion. So that's what I think. That's where I think we should start. We need to be putting ourselves into a state that is ready to be healed, not, obviously ramped up, which is the opposite of that. And so we're all in this together. Everybody's got problems, from the Insta model to your Uber driver. I mean, everybody's got issues, and you're not alone. And so there's nothing to be, we shouldn't be so in a hurry, I guess, to try to get over things. I mean, people want, when I work with somebody, they want their blood test right away. They want their poop test right away. And they want, like, what can I do right now? And it's like, oh gosh, no, we got to take a step back, take inventory, just calm down, put yourself in a state that's going to be ready for healing. Such an important thing to think about, because you could be doing all the things, but you're so ramped up, right, emotionally and energetically and spiritually, that it means nothing. It's not going to work because you're not allowing your being to be able to receive that fully.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a deep download, deep down into your heart, into your soul when you talk about these big details. And also, if you're listening right now, how about a nice replenishing deep breath right now? Like, let's just do it. Just do it together. Because I don't know about you, when I get stressed out, Dr. D, I shallow breathe. I'm like, I'm a panting dog over here going nuts, right? So it's that little detail of just remembering to focus on the breath, slowing down.
That's the stress response.
Yeah. So you talk about stop and let go. Tell us more of what that means.
Yeah, so stopping and letting go is that, so slowing down, and then not being so controlling. I think that's always, I like to prescribe like 2 weeks of, let's just stop. Like, don't worry about anything. I know you're having health issues, but let's just stop. Give your body some time to just, physically to catch up with the emotional aspect of yourself. Like, don't have rules, don't have any kind of, agenda. Let's just take a break.
On your diet is what you mean, like no
diet,
restrictions,
exercise, even.
Okay.
So all those things, right? Let's kind of reset. Let's just stop. And then during that week, during the week to 2 weeks, if you want, you can just journal, right? So that's where food, mood, and poop journaling can come in. And so let's just take some data down, and then we can kind of start working towards building up. So that's the stopping and slowing down part. And again, that's part of that mindfulness, trying to get your body into a state ready for healing. For gut problems specifically, if we're talking about steps to take, we do have to address the non-negotiables. So there are foods that we know can impact our bodies negatively, especially if you're having digestive issues. So that's going to come. And the non-negotiables are simple. It's refined sugar, dairy, grains, corn, soy. Those are the things that we know absolutely will disrupt your digestive system. Right. But I don't want you to think about that for at least 2 weeks. Let's just, like I said, let go. Right. And let's just focus on trying to get to a place where you're okay, where you've slowed down, and then we build up from that.
And the reality is, if you're listening to this during the Christmas holidays, it may mean that you just slow down and stop and let go and observe what's happening now. And then you really start to do that elimination technique of eliminating refined sugars or eliminating dairy for, a series of days in January when you have hit the reset button and are starting anew. And that's okay, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's, if maybe some of your listeners would be interested in the types of diets that they would try to follow. Mm-hmm. I would have them do a basic elimination like we just talked about. So that's refined sugar, dairy. This is at the beginning of the year would be a perfect time to do it. Yeah. Generally speaking, you'd want to do an elimination for at least 30 days. So that's important. You have to give your body time to reap the benefits. I like starting patients off on a paleo type diet. I think that's a really healthy diet that combines lots of vegetables and lots of healthy meats, and you eliminate, again, some of those non-negotiables. Mm-hmm. So that's where I would have somebody start with just a 30-day paleo reset. If after 30 days they're not improved, the next diet, and I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but low FODMAP would be the next dietary recommendation. FODMAPs are fermentable sugars. And so there's healthy foods, quote unquote, healthy foods that could be causing problems. Mm-hmm. So that would kind of be the next step up. A little bit more difficult, but that's what you would do. Eliminate those FODMAPs for 30 days. If they're still not better, then I would suggest starting to look into some testing and trying to figure out the actual dysfunctions, that are keeping them from getting better.
Okay. Got it. So again, we'll put the links in the show notes for everybody if these things are going by super fast and you're listening and on the go right now. Again, the simplifierspodcast.com. So then what would you suggest, any tips and tricks of what things are better to eat right now and what things are best to avoid? So grandma's cookies are going to be on our plate later this week, and I sure as hell know that pumpkin pie is going to make an appearance at some point. But overall, after the holidays, are there better things to eat and better things to not?
Absolutely. So we should always start with the idea of whole foods, right? So, I mean, we know that. I mean, whole foods are the foods that are in their whole form, different from foods that are in box or packages or canned.
Right.
That's always the best place to start for anybody, right? Any kind of condition or just for optimal health. If we're talking about digestive issues, then again, eliminating the core foods that cause problems, which would be refined sugar, corn, soy, dairy, gluten. Also, insoluble fibers. So you have a lot of foods that could have high insoluble fibers that we would consider to be healthy. But if you have digestive issues, that could actually be creating more inflammation. So you have to, and those foods are great for you, but not until you're healthy, right? So if you're not healthy and you're having issues, that causes a problem. It's too much for you. So high insoluble foods are those that I would eliminate as well.
What would be an example of that? Like,
so your high insoluble foods, you'll have, I mean, there's a lot of them, and there's a whole list that I can give you.
Yeah.
You know, I've got food lists that I'll make sure your listeners have access to. Let's say like cabbage, broccoli, spinach, you know, so, and these are all foods that it's like, oh gosh, these are really healthy. But if you have digestive issues, again, it could just, it's like a cut that you have on your hand and you're just always picking at it.
Yeah.
You never let it heal. And so, because you're always picking at it. And that's what these foods could be doing. They're just continuing the inflammatory cascade and process. And it's not until you allow that cut to fully heal that then you can tolerate those foods.
Got it. So everybody just heard Dr. D said no cabbage, no broccoli over the holidays. Yes to pumpkin pie. You're absolutely fine. Carry on. No, I'm just kidding. So what else can we do? What are some simple steps we can take to improve our gut health just today?
So the immediate things, again, I would, you could start with your food, mood, and poop journaling. That's number one. Slow down. Make sure you're chewing your food adequately because that's where digestion begins. A lot of times we swallow food whole, and that's going to create all sorts of disruption. And that's something that a lot of times people don't think about. It's just they're chewing, how well they're chewing their food. Second to that, there are supplements that people can take that have been proven to be effective. I mean, there's tons, thousands of supplements out there, but only a few that have been shown to be beneficial, at least in the long run in terms of research. Digestive enzymes. So a good digestive enzyme is something I'd absolutely recommend for somebody to consider. You also have probiotics, of course, and I think that's important to simplify probiotics. There's a lot of probiotics out there, but the reality is there's only 3 specific types that when you look at the bottle on the back, there's only 3 that you can benefit from. Lactobacillus, that's one family. Saccharomyces is another family, and then Bacillus. So a lot of times people have 4 different bottles of probiotics, and they're all the same. They all contain lactobacillus, Saccharomyces, Bacillus. So don't complicate it. Don't get sold on all the different marketing that's out there. It's really just those 3 categories. And I can share that information with you. I've got a handout for that. Right. But I think that's important because we complicate supplements. It doesn't have to be complicated. You do a digestive enzyme, do a probiotic. And that's basically where I would start with something like that. Slow the way you're chewing, eat well. Those are the big ones.
And come back to stress. I mean, whatever you can do to reduce the stress will also help little tummy here trying to run away from Aunt Brenda to actually slow down and digest her food and eliminate appropriately. So I think stress is a huge part of it, right?
That's why that's number one. When I say slow down, that's part of that, right? It's
right.
Physically slowing down and then also emotionally. So there's, that kind of parlays into those 2 categories. So we're trying to address the stress part of that.
Oh, it's so fascinating, Dr. D. And I truly appreciate you coming on and telling us about this because I think we just think, well, gut health is all down to what we eat, but actually there's so much more to it, isn't there?
So much more. The obvious, we talk about the obvious signs. Again, you could have digestive issues that are obvious. There's so many other aspects of our life, and you might have these signs, but not ever make it, not ever connect it to something gut related.
Yeah.
Hormone imbalances, skin issues like acne, things like that, that are absolutely connected to the gut. And so if you're having those signs and symptoms, it could be a gut issue, especially if you've been working on trying to solve some health problems and you haven't been able to figure it out and get to the bottom of it despite all the things that you're doing. I would check the gut if you haven't done that.
Yeah. And again, if you are curious of what Dr. Daniel's talking about, I highly, highly recommend checking out his website, drdaniel.com. He's based in Austin, Texas, the land of sunshine, but he works with clients all over the world. So, I think that this is a good first step to explore this, because I know I've talked to girlfriends of mine who have had issues with their tummy and just weird pains for years, and just assumed, well, that's just me getting older, and that's just my body aches or my chronic pain. But in reality, there probably is something deeper to the root cause of it. And it's fascinating as we start to explore this and understand that there may be something that actually can be fixed, that you don't have to live with this chronic pain for the rest of your life, right?
Right. Absolutely. That's such an important thing. There's, you obviously only pass through this life once, and you have every right to live a high quality life. And so we should never just accept that, okay, this is where I'm at, because that's not true. There are a lot of things that you can do to feel amazing. And we see this very clearly in the literature, is that it's not a matter of age. There are 80-year-olds that have amazing health, and plenty of them from different parts of the world. And there are 40-year-olds who are very sick and very unhealthy, right? So there's the combinations, and we should never just accept where we are. We should always be looking to the actual cause. And it's frustrating. It's hard. It's not easy. That's why, it's such a big thing. But it's possible. Absolutely possible.
Yeah. So if you've ever gone to your general practitioner doctor and just felt like they were just prescribing you pills after pills after pills to solve the problem, maybe this is something to explore. And, I know a lot of you guys that are listening are business owners, and we talk a lot about business topics, but you know what? This affects how you run your business. If you are not feeling whole and happy, and your tummy is all in knots, then it's going to translate to every aspect of how you run your business as well. So again, check out Dr. Daniel's website, drdaniel.com. Is there one particular place on social media that you like to hang out at?
Instagram.
Okay, cool.
Instagram's my place, at Dr. Daniel DC. So you can follow me there. And yeah, I put a lot of information on my profile there. And most people actually, a lot of the treatments and therapies you can find, if you dig through my feed, you'll find there's all sorts of things that I give recommendations for.
Amazing. And again, we'll put all those links in the show notes for people to check that out and click through and be able to connect with you. And again, I really want you to feel encouraged if you're listening to this. There is a lot of big terms, I have no idea how he spelled most of those probiotics either. Let's just be real. But just start simple. Start with one or two things here or there and start chipping away at it. And really it's exploration of how your body works. And once you become more aware of your cycles and your patterns, then you can start to see where things might be a little bit off, and then bring in somebody like Dr. D as a professional to say, oh, well, what about this? Have you thought about this? And all of that as well. So, Dr. D, I have a couple of questions that I'd like to ask you, that I like to ask everybody that comes on the podcast. Quick fire mode. Here we go. So tell us, what's one book or blog that you're reading these days that's either inspiring you or poking holes and challenging your belief system?
So let me share this. I am a super nerd, and I'm always reading scientific journals, and that's pretty much what I read.
Oh my goodness.
Right now, the science book that I'm reading is Integrative Gastroenterology. It's a second edition. Anyway, I was really excited. This just came out last month, and so I got it, and that's what I'm reading. That's the nerd part of me. Now, my wife has challenged me to go beyond, non-fictional books, and so I'm reading a book called The Silent Patient. And I basically only read that like when I travel, or if I'm sitting in an airplane, things like that. But that's challenging me because I get a little stressed if I'm getting away from,
Yeah.
again, studying or doing things like that, but I'm trying to do better as far as expanding my horizons on different types of entertainment.
Excellent. Okay, we'll put a link in the show notes for the second book, maybe not the first one, but we'll put them both in. Okay, so tell us, who is one person in your network, somebody you know personally that you just feel is up to brilliant things that we could shine a spotlight on them, and who knows, maybe in the new year we might interview them and have them on the podcast.
The first person that I think about for that is Adi Cashew.
Mm-hmm.
She's a wonderful person. She's the CEO, founder of Working Against Gravity, which is a nutrition coaching company for athletes. So she kind of focuses on that. But she's great all around. I mean, I think she's such a wonderful thought leader, and especially for women in business.
Brilliant. Okay, we'll put a link for Adi on there as well. So I believe gratitude and simplicity go hand in hand. Tell us, what one thing are you grateful for today?
I'm grateful for my brain, honestly, and for being able. And when I say that, I mean it's like being. There are so many people that when we think about things like Alzheimer's and dementia and not being able to formulate thoughts. Because obviously we rely on our brains a whole lot. And so I'm grateful for being able to get up and think about the things that I think about every day, and that I personally don't let things impact me in a negative way. Like I know that we can, and I don't know where that came about or how I got wired in that way, but I'm just overly optimistic about things, and I've been able to see that has helped me in not just my professional career, but like with my family, and so I'm grateful for that, is being able to see things in a different light when maybe other people around me don't.
And I'm so grateful that Carly Polak had recommended you to us so that we could pick your brain and learn more as well. Okay, so again, you can check out his website at drdaniel.com. And my final question for you today is this. Somebody somewhere is listening to this episode right now, thinking about her poop and sitting in her childhood bedroom that looks exactly like it looked 30 years ago. And she's probably also very stressed. Her tummy is in knots and she is out of her routine. She has had way too many leftovers and her stomach feels horrible. What's one thing that you could just whisper into her ear right now to encourage her in this moment?
You're doing a good job and it's going to be okay. I think we need to know that everything that we are doing, obviously we do it for a reason. And the people that you're with right now, if you're in your bedroom and you're upset about how you're feeling, all the people that are there, as maybe as upset as they can make you, they love you, and you're not alone, and you can lift yourself up. You can stand up and make improvements and changes in your life.
Yeah, and change happens one tiny choice at a time. Yeah. Thank you so much,
Yep.
Dr. Daniel, for your time. I really appreciate you.
You bet.